Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 3 of season 4 of The Flash, Luck Be a Lady. And this I thought was a reasonably solid episode. It's kind of a let's sort of just slow things down a little bit episode. Kind of meant to be a little bit lighter, a little bit softer, a little bit more fun. And given how grim and dark some of the things have gotten over the last couple of seasons at times, it's not sort of nice to return to that more fun feeling that we especially had during the season 1 of The Flash. But I do like that it makes sure not to go like super over the top to the point of absurdity, like what happens, I think, kind of a little too much over on Legends of Tomorrow. But we'll get to that in my Legends of Tomorrow review for this week's episode. Okay, anyway, getting back on track. Yeah, let's start with the character with Hazard. This is a character who's, I think, best known for appearing in the Infinity Incorporated comics from the 1980s. I don't know anything about the character in particular. Supposedly, she's like the granddaughter of a character called the Gambler, who did sort of pop up from time to time in the olden days. I think he was best known as an enemy of the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott. People have pointed out that her uniform from the casino seems to be based on her character's old costume from the 80s, which, I mean, cool and all of that. Hazard, I think, was. I mean, I certainly have no problems with the actress that did the performance. Apparently, she's well known up in Canada. I mean, the show's filmed there, so not super surprising there. But I just think that they went a little bit too light, I think, on just sort of really fleshing her out as a character, at least in some regards. Sort of like when she gets fired from the casino. Um, okay, first of all, she apparently gets fired for spilling a drink on a guy who had just leaned over and pinched her butt. That's a casino. That's totally going to be on a security camera, and you know as I understand it, casinos are, pretty serious about people not doing that sort of thing to their employees. Of course, granted, she was also said, like, more or less kind of like, yeah, just hit or whatever. Um, Also, quite sure casino employees are not supposed to give people gambling advice. But nonetheless, yeah, that would have been on camera, and if she got fired because of stuff that happened because a dude pinched her butt, she totally could have sued that casino. And what's the deal with she goes out, she finds the boot, I guess they call it on the car, and she says like, "Oh God, I'm going to have to get a new car." No, you don't. You just have to pay to have that removed. Um, Now, a lot of people are generally kind of sympathetic towards Stacy. Was it Stacy? Becky. That's right, Becky. Um, And, with these good reasons, she doesn't seem to be a bad person. She's obviously a person who's had a lot of tough luck in life, and when things seem to be going her way, she goes a little overboard and becomes a little bit selfish. But she's not really maliciously trying to hurt anyone, except for her ex-boyfriend, who, in all fairness, was a tool. But the whole thing of, oh well, I'm going to engineer it, you're going to use like other power so that he gets, extremely hot soup spilled on his lap. People make jokes about that old lady that sued McDonald's because she spilled hot coffee on her lap, but they don't seem to realize that coffee was, in fact, extremely hot and did genuinely do serious damage to her skin. Okay, I've seen people in, like, with my own eyes who suffered really serious burns. That sort of thing is not a joke. And, well, think about how, how happy you would be if it's something extremely hot enough to do serious damage to your body was poured in your lap. So, kind of playing that for comedy seems a little bit in poor taste to me. I mean, granted, the guy was a cheating jerk, but still, that doesn't really make it seem as if, him suffering horrific, disfiguring burns is equal to the sin. But again, maybe I'm just taking this all a little bit too seriously. I do like that. Oh yeah, and when Hazard goes into the bank and steals the money, um, I just love that there's basically this vault. There's money, stacks and stacks of money just sitting there in the vault, and there's not even like a security guard next to the door. Now, granted, we do see some other security guards there, but seriously, why is there not someone standing directly in front of that door to make sure that there's no chance that no one can go in? That's just. On the other hand, that did lead to the situation where we get to see the Flash slip on a bunch of marbles, so I'm kind of willing to let that slide. And I did also sort of like that scene where Barry tries to sort of reason with her, and she just sort of like simply says like, "Look, you seem like a decent guy, but don't mess with me. Bad things happen to people that mess with me." And you have to wonder, does she even really truly understand just how much she controls, or the kind of damage she could do? I mean, there's all this stuff going on around her that could potentially seriously hurt or possibly even kill people. So how much does she understand of what she's able to do there specifically? It really sort of, I think, does kind of throw her in a negative light that she's willing to seemingly threaten somebody, use the lives of innocent people to threaten in someone. So there's that. Um, I do like that her main thing really just seems to be that she's just sort of apathetic towards what happens to other people because of this. It's sort of like, you know what, I've had rotten luck all my life. I finally found something good. If this means that, just for a little while someone else has some bad luck, well, that'll be just part of their lives for a few minutes and then they'll go on and everything will be back to normal. The bad luck thing was just a non-stop in my life. That, I think, really does nicely humanize her. And the truth of it all is, yes, when bad luck does strike us, it's usually something that is only relevant for a very brief period of time, but not always. I mean, if you spill coffee all over your laptop, well, that's going to mess up your laptop. And if you're like me, your computer is a big chunk of your life, so that's going to cause some pretty serious issues for your life, at least in the short term. Still. I do like that at the end, when she is caught, she seems to be sort of pretty polite about the whole thing. Kind of like, I guess you have to take me to jail now. That was cute. Let's see, what else? The Joe and Cecile thing, I mean, that was nicely done. I'm glad they're taking the time to really flesh Cecile out more as a character this season. I mean, we kind of got a start with her last season. We got to meet her daughter, and there was enough that we really did feel properly connected to her. Now, her turning out to be pregnant. Well, she's not so old that you can't think that, okay, there was an egg or two still left in the basket. And I can't help but wonder if this is paving the way for Daniel West, which could potentially be extremely interesting for the future, but we'll have to see. And let's see, what else do we want to talk about here? Of course, it'll be very interesting to see how Iris reacts to all of this. And then there's the whole, it looks like we're going to need more diapers line from the first episode, which is certainly something to think about. Let's see, what else do we have to talk about here? Nothing in particular to say about Caitlin. Oh yes, of course we have the situation with Wally and Jesse breaking up, and Wally's been kind of a little bit on the back burner so far this season, which has been disappointing. But it'll be interesting to see what they decide to ultimately do with him. There's people who have been speculating he might end up going on Legends of Tomorrow, which would be pretty interesting because there's some stuff going on there with some of the characters due to behind the scenes stuff. So we'll see. But yeah, they definitely, I think, need to find some sort of a niche for Wally because, what is there for him besides just sort of being the sidekick to Barry? There needs to be something that is genuinely 100% Wally's. The breakup cube, that was cute. It was certainly nice to see another mention of Atlantis. Let's let's see. So, the breakup cube. Yes, this ultimately leads to Harry Wells coming back, and I do like that he's on Earth One basically because his own the team Jesse or whatever we want to call him that he assembled, and including his own daughter, got so fed up with his crummy attitude that they basically kicked him out. Yeah, you'd think that Harry would have learned a lesson by now, but apparently not. And him immediately butting heads with Cisco. I mean, that was some pretty hilarious stuff, especially with the "you deserve to be cursed at" thing. And yeah, that his interactions with Cisco were really, really good. Although you have to kind of wonder if some of that isn't just sort of residual from Cisco having such a good, at least he thought so, bond with Eobard Thawne back in season one, and then sort of, hey, here we've got Harrison Wells, and I mean they're in a lot of ways very similar people, so it is understandable that they might be some friction there. But it is nice to see that even though he's a jerk, the Team Flash does care about Harry, and that basically saying like, hey man, why don't you hang here? You've stuck your neck out enough for us, even though you're kind of a dick. I mean, yeah, that was some good stuff there. Oh yeah, speaking of Cisco, I absolutely loved it when he did the whole "you have failed this city" thing. That was some brilliant stuff there. Let's see. Nothing particular to say about the Thinker this episode. No, we do sort of get a little bit more insight into his plan. We learn where the new metahumans came from, and the idea that Barry is the one that unintentionally created them is certainly very interesting. Just good old-fashioned coffee right now. Now, exactly how the Thinker could possibly have known, like, that 12 metahumans would be created when this happened, I mean, I don't think he had any way of knowing where Barry would have come out. I think he probably assumed that, okay, this is the place where all of this happened, this is the place he's connected to, this is the place where we're going to do the whole get Barry out of the Speed Force thing. So presumably he will reemerge from the Speed Force somewhere in Central City, but how he knew that would happen, in the middle of the city where enough people could be exposed to dark matter that it would actually amount to something, is a little bit of a head scratcher. I mean, we've seen there's some boony areas right around the city. How did he know that Barry wouldn't pop out in like the middle of some farmer's cornfield? Some things I guess you just have to sort of let go. Yeah, but the whole thing, like these people who are on a bus and they get exposed to this, this actually reminds me oddly of what I recall of basically sort of being the origin of like a superhero team called the Strangers from Malibu Comics from like back in like the 90s. And the thing was like something crazy happened to a group of people that were on a street trolley in San Francisco, and basically everybody on the streetcar ended up getting powers, and they called themselves the Strangers because that's what they were when they got their powers. They were just random people who happened to be on the same streetcar. Sorry, I never really read much Malibu back in the day. I just happened to recall reading something about that, and that always did strike me as being a pretty interesting idea for the origin of a superhero team and the characters around them. Let's see. Anything else? Oh yeah, we almost forgot to talk about Iris. Um, I'm also a little disappointed by what they're doing with Iris in this episode. This just seems to be another example of Iris really freaking out over stuff that rationally she shouldn't freak out over. I mean, her basically sort of barging into the church that's on the heels of a funeral to sort of say, like, hey, priest, marry us. Okay, that ain't gonna happen. Um, there's legal paperwork that has to be filled out for this sort of thing. You can't just walk up to a priest and say, "Hey, dude, marry us." Okay, that's not how it works. I mean, again, this is TV. You have to let certain things go for the sake of drama, but still. never mind, and the whole thing like, oh my God, how are we going to find a venue? Well, okay, you have a friend who's a super rich guy over in Star City who happens to be the mayor. I'm sure he can pull some strings for you if you're willing to consider getting married in Star City. Or, him being Oliver Queen, I'm sure he's got some connections in Central City. But again, you can't really lean too much on, get Oliver to help with your problems on The Flash. The same way, the whole, well, why doesn't Oliver just ask Barry for help? Well, the answer over on Arrow is because it's Oliver's show, and if he has Barry come and solve all of his problems, then what's the point of Oliver even being the protagonist? Anyway, I think that kind of covers everything we had to say this time around. So thanks for tuning in, guys. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can join me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi and Tumblr as well at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.